So I've been doing this mentorship program for about 8, 9 months now, mentoring folks at all different levels of design. It's a first timer for me this year to do it at this capacity. I'm learning a lot, and I've been seeing all these patterns kind of emerging. One of the biggest ones being around differentiation. I think it's a wonderful topic, and the fact that a lot of designers are looking for this is because of the changing market. So if you're someone who has been hit with layoffs or having a hard time finding a job, this is really something for you to be able to make yourself stand out and be unique in the sea of designers. If you're a newcomer to design, really might not be the best session for you. Maybe you could just to see what's out there and if you're curious. But really, the expectation is that if you are a junior, you might want to try all kinds of things. Don't don't pigeonhole yourself from the start, and you want to see where your strengths are, having a as well as where maybe you might be deficient in. But you should be trying all kinds of stuff, and I would argue that this is not the time to trying to start really thinking through differentiation. Good to have in the back of your mind, that's fine, but really the session I've catered this for mid to senior folks and up. So I've called it the hungry unicorn, being a symbol in the tech industry about being unique, and hungry just meaning someone. I'm assuming that if you're here, that you are actively looking to up level, and you're hungry to change your brand and build up what kind of designer you're going to be. Career modeling is an interesting word. I don't know if it's heavily used. I'm using it here because a lot of the things I'm going to show you today are based on business modeling. Why? Because there's a ton of frameworks in business modeling specific to finding differentiation for companies. So I'm going to bring those same exact frameworks that I learned from my background. I've noticed that there's a huge deficiency in translating business frameworks into design. I've seen a lot of other UX and product design differentiation workshops on YouTube. I'm not saying they're terrible. I just think that there is a better way of doing it. So I've broken this down into a couple of different sections. One is really about introducing who I am and why that's even relevant here. I don't usually do introductions all the time, but I think it's very relevant here, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. Uh, the game. This is just a little bit of like kind of level setting on what's going on in the industry. And a couple months from now, this will be probably very different. But knowing the market is a big part of doing modeling, career modeling. The third part will be about assessing competencies. And competencies is a word we use to say what's special, all the special things about yourself. No doubt you'll already at this point have some of those things in mind. This section will kind of show you how to do that. The fourth section is to now take that and compare it to what's needed in the market and see where the gaps and deficiencies are, where your strengths might actually transform into something that's very useful to market. So it's not just about looking at yourself, but also looking at the market and then filling those gaps to get there. The last one, I'll provide you with some next steps. This is going to be a 3-part series. This first one is really around building that competency, and I'll show you what the next parts are going to be too in a second. Put this little, like throughout the presentation, I put some kind of like little tidbits on the side here. This is actually part of this whole presentation was something I did for a workshop several months ago, so I'm recycling that for this video because I don't want that stuff to be lost. So Mushin no Shin is a Buddhist term. Zen Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, meaning the mind without mind. I love this. A lot of designers have adopted this is because when you're approaching something new or new subject matter, I think there's this idea that designers need to be subject matter experts. It's not true. I know we hire companies hire based on your experience in a certain industry. I'd love to challenge that idea, and that the power of designers actually comes from the fact that we can approach problems like a child, that we don't have previous biases walking into things. So as you're doing this, as you're going into this, I challenge you to do these exercises without that bias. Leave those at the door, because I think you're at your best when you don't add those complexes and biases. All right, so the first section here. Sorry, I feel like I don't know where to put this. My face. I don't even need to show my mug. I don't know why I do this. Someone told me that it's good to show my face, but I'm not particularly cute. So I wanted to show you that I have some credibility to be talking about this stuff and why it's important that my background, that I am bringing kind of these strategic models or frameworks into what I'm calling career modeling. All right, let's slow down for a second. So I just want to dictate this so that you know exactly what this video is, what this presentation is going to be about. I want to help you identify competitive advantages, and not just any competitive advantages. We're looking for things that can be unique and sustainable long term, and really think about your competitive advantages like a castle. Your most important assets are there, your family, your jewels, or whatever it is. Those are your assets, and you have to protect those things. And how to protect them is through what we call moats, or ways to make sure that nobody can do what you do, essentially. Because the market is essentially uh, uh, all the goodies, the resources for you to survive, right? And you want to protect it in as long as possible. So think long term. I know that we want to see what's right in front of us, the candy in front of us, but long term is really key here. Some guidelines as you go through this. Some of these are really obvious, but the first and most important one is about objectivity. You have nothing to prove to me or anybody around you. Your objectivity helps you be real with yourself and do a true assessment and to gain perspective here. And don't lie to yourself as you go through this exercise. Number two is future state. Think about not where the market is right now, but the trajectory of where the marketplace is going to be. We're always aiming for that. Number three is career modeling as you go. That just means that this is not a one and done documentation, one and done practice. You got to go and always think about this. I think every 5 years or so, it really hits you again. That's natural. It's going to come back and it'll help you grow as you update this. Number four is put in the work. I only put this in here even though it sounds obvious because so many folks I've seen trying to find shortcuts in these exercises. That's not how it works. Just because you take shortcuts or try to find a way to make it work, make things look good in these exercises, doesn't mean that it's gonna manifest into great things in your real career. You have to put in the work. Don't use ChatGPT. It'll hurt you. You got to do this manually because strategy is that's it. It's you gotta put in the work to do it. All right, so some of my goals, so what I'm doing here. I am just going to be providing tools for you. I can't obviously be too prescriptive with this stuff, but showing you what might work and to help you explore yourself is something that I'm going to try to do here. Number two, I'm going to try to shift your attitude a little bit and to be critical and objective of your career to help you be objective. Number three is to introduce some new perspectives, which is kind of the same thing, saying the same thing. I'm going to learn and iterate. I'm going to update. This is a second round I'm doing this and iterating this presentation, and because I want to see if it actually works. And number five is I'm going to be trying to be as concise and clear about these frameworks. Some of them are really complex, but I will do my best to translate them. All right, so I said earlier that this is 1 out of 3 parts. Today's we're just going to be doing about what we're going to be doing is taking your competencies and evaluate them. And I'm going to introduce some of the tools I use to do that. All right, the market. All right, so the first thing here, obviously, and probably a lot of you guys already know, is there is a huge supply of UX designers and product designers. Nielsen Norman set out an estimation last year that there's about a million designers in the U.S., which is just growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So any of you guys who feel like, hey, we're we've got a surplus of designers. It's not going to stop, most likely, because we still do have, there is still a need to have good builders and sensible builders, right, out there. Oh yeah, we've got a lot of designers. It's not alleviating. And on top of that, we've got a very low demand. So Indeed posted some kind of decreases from the previous decade. It's a 70% plus drop in postings since 2021. I'm sorry, not the previous decade, from 2021. And then Zippia just estimated about less than 10,000 employed UX in the U.S. I think the last time I saw at the end of the year was something like 18,000 jobs filled, so it doubled since. So I could be wrong. Um, but again, the point is that there's very, very low demand for it. This is changing this year, next year. All right, so here's the first kind of framework I want to introduce you to, and you can kind of look this up. There's a gentleman named Michael Porter. He's made a bunch of framework to assess markets, but this one is called Porter's Five Forces, and I would say just a quick and easy way to assess the market. I'll move my noggin so you guys can kind of see better. And I did one from like about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, and one now of the UX and product design market, the UX and product design market, yeah. And back then, you really had, the green is obviously good and the red is bad. The gray is just moderate. But the five different forces that we're referring to in this framework is competitive rivalry, meaning like, are there a lot of us out there, right? That are on terms of supply, like folks, UX designer compared to jobs, and back then there weren't a lot of us, very very few of us. Supplier here means like the institutions that were creating designers like us. Are there a lot of them, and how much can they influence the market? And at that point, there were quite a lot of institutes that were talking about things that are similar to what we're doing, not specifically UX, but very very similar. Buyer power is the institutions that are purchasing us or hiring us in this case. And it was also not too bad. It was beginning to rise. I think they were realizing we need guys that specialize in this thing called, apps and around, I think around 2008-ish is when the Apple iOS market kind of opened up, and there was an influx of a lot of Flash, for example, Flash design, and it was big. So there was this big bursts after the .com era where everybody wanted super interactive stuff. Threat of substitution. So substitution is like, okay, not other designers, but are there substitutes that can do similar things to what we're doing? And at that time, product design didn't really exist as the way it does today. Product design came out of the industrial design practice. So companies like IDEO were hiring these industrial designers. And then they began to add this idea of a product design as kind of branching out beyond just artifacts, physical artifacts. But there was like web design and the idea of digital, but it was still not too bad for the rest for us there. And then threat of new entry. There was very little threat of too many people coming in. We were expected to know a lot of stuff, everything from being able to code to animate to do Flash and ActionScript. The barriers to entries were really really high. And learning this stuff was not as accessible back then. So you see that's why you see a lot of green back then. Today, it's drastically more different. Again, I won't spend too much time on this, but in terms of competitive rivalry, we've got a lot more designers out there in the market. Supplier power, there's a lot more institutions that are creating designers, like colleges, universities have more programs available for this, but also boot camps and crowdsourcing websites are also providing supply of more accessibility for companies to find designers on the cheap. Buyer power is very very strong right now. It became apparent that design was a little bit overvalued, and so they're looking for really really there's less jobs, and so they get to kind of dictate who and what they can gatekeep much harder now. Threat of substitution. There's a lot of different practices that do similar things now, and it's become apparent and accessible as well. So, service design, UI design, AI is also around. There's tons of different practices that kind of mesh into each other. Product design is now very much something similar to UX and UI. And finally, threat of entry. It's much easier to get into the practice and create new UX designers or product designers. Kind of morbid, huh? Thinking about this, it doesn't look great. Okay, so there is a silver lining to a lot of this stuff, a couple of silver linings. I want to introduce the positive too. Now that you've sat through, if you're this far now, you've listened to me talking about the sad parts of it. I love this quote by Again Cooper, and he talks about, I'll just read it out. There are still fewer UX jobs than there were at the end of 2022. I'm not going to pretend there hasn't been a downturn, but ultimately there is still a deficit of qualified and highly qualified individuals. And this was, I think, early 2023, or end of 2023, I'm sorry. And the point here is that we've got a lot of UX designers, but there is a kind of a gap between the mid senior versus the junior guys. And so if this is a slap in the face to you, let it be, and use it to really understand how folks who are hiring, as well as the academics, how they are looking at the market right now. They won't say it. Nobody wants to get get in trouble for that, but that is the reality. And you could get angry, or you can do something about it, up level. The second silver lining is that if you feel like the job market is filled with folks who are not able to do their job correctly, or there is too many folks who are not at the level they should be, what that's going to create economically or theoretically is that you get a lot of experience debt. And with a lot of experience debt, that also means more jobs. And that's like a really messed up way of saying, if people mess up the companies and mess up on their jobs, that means there's more jobs to come fix stuff up. So that's the other aspect of it as well. So just to review, number one is that the market sucks, but it's getting better. Number two is that basic UX is a commodity. If you're a junior, very junior person, or you're someone that's transitioning from junior to mid or mid to senior, you need more skills. That's really important. The baseline stuff is really important, but you need to stand out beyond the other designers. And number three, high quality UX is rare but extremely needed. Kind of in the same light. Okay. I just wanted to answer this question because I feel like there's some folks that need to hear this out there. Is, will differentiating myself save my career? No, there's no freaking silver bullets. There's no button you can press or one session that you can go to that'll fix this. There's a whole bunch of problems out there that you have to address one by one. Some of the stuff is that the game is pitted against you. It absolutely does exist, which is like ageism, sexism, like these hiring prejudices. The question is, like, can you find your tribe? Can you find the people, a good support system around you? Can you identify what it is, the skills that you need to really push hard around? So differentiation will do one of those things. It'll help with one of those things. So don't come in here with the attitude that this is going to fix everything. It will do a big chunk if you do this well. All right. Now that we got that, now we can introduce some actual competencies. This is not going to be a workshop. I'm not going to actually walk through these with you, but you should workshop this stuff. Okay, so I said earlier that we're going to go over competencies. So here's the first one. This is like the money shot for me. And if you want to get a template for this, I'm gonna put it in the website, which is goodestdesign.club. There'll be a section coming soon for, if it's not up by the time you watch this, it'll be in a section called freebies or in the resources section. And there is a framework in strategy and business modeling called VRIO, and VRIO is a heuristic that really gives you the ability to quickly assess a competency. And competencies are those things that make you special, right? Like I'm very fast at prototyping. That's a competency that makes you stand out from other people. And this is a way to use this framework to assess that. So one of the things that you should do before you start doing this is try to write out all the competencies that you can about yourself, even if it might not directly correlate with UX or product design. Maybe you have a background in music. That could be a competency, say, if you are doing music, working in music tech, right? Or understanding music interfaces, and you have to work on that music tech interfaces or music reading, graphic notation interfaces, things like that. There can be for certain situations that could be a huge asset. So go through and see if you can write at least 50 competencies about yourself. Think about it through stories in your career. What has people told you? What did you do really well? And write those out. And then you're going to put on 4 columns to the right is VRI, not O, but S. We're going to change this last one for the sake of that. We're not doing business modeling. We're doing career modeling. So the V is this competency valuable? And 2 is it rare in the market amongst other designers? Number 3 is it inimitable? This is a funky word, but inimitable is it hard to imitate? Is it difficult to imitate? This is a really, really important one. And number 4 is we're going to change from O, which was organizational support, to sustainable. Can this happen long term? So, for example, like some competencies you can do really well right now because it happens to be something that you're good at, but it's something that changes. Like if that's like maybe like something that's trendy, and through the years it changes often, and it's really hard to stay up to date with it. Is that something that you can continuously do without too much effort? So sustainability is something to think about because things change, times change. All right, so here's an example, or not an example. This is essentially a scorecard. I'm going to keep this on the site so that you can download it, or you can just take a look at this or screenshot it and just use it. And you'll write your competencies here on the left, and then you can either score it from a scale of 1 to 5 if you want to be really, really specific, or just be a check and saying, yeah, it is valuable, or no as an X, or maybe, I'm not sure. The maybe is really important too, because it could mean in certain situations that it is actually valuable or not. Something to think about. All right. So now that I've introduced you to the VRIO framework, I also want to help you kind of identify some of the business needs out there. So I'll probably introduce this go into more depth in the next session, but it's really around industry cross drivers, and it's called a value chain. The idea is that every person who works on a project, each step of a project is inserting some sort of value into it as it goes down the chain, down the stream, until finally it's collected. That value is collected by your user. And it's a good way to identify operations and where there's lacking in that operation. So one of the competencies might be around more of this, and this is a role that's becoming more and more prevalent that I'm seeing, is design ops. So if that's something that interests you and you're looking for efficiencies, this is a really great exercise. On the left side, you kind of insert the step in that value chain. I put an example in here. For example, you got research in the beginning, you got some strategy and planning, then you begin prototyping, you do some evaluative research like user testing, then you iterate, you do design UAT or before you launch it or do a soft launch, and then you measure it in some way, A/B testing. So that's like a general flow of value chain. There might be more steps in between from your experience. Put those in there, and then you could identify what are the things that cost money along the way, that are full of risk, and then these are great ways how you can identify what a business needs. And another great way to look at this is to see what's available to the businesses out there. One of the things that we talk about in strategy is efficiency of information. And you don't always have the same information on your side as you do with the person across from you at the table. So businesses don't always expose everything. And one of the most valuable things for us as candidates to possibly work in those companies is knowing what they're actually looking for. And one of those things that they do expose themselves with is the job listings. And so you can, and that's totally free for you to go and download those, right? So I've taken these job listings, for example, you're on the right. And you might ask, well, doesn't everybody just like copy and paste these all the time? Maybe as a start, but from my experience and like talking to my friends who are hiring managers, there's so much risk around hiring. Like you don't want to mess that up. So we actually spend a lot of time on these job listings to give those clues to what we're looking for. It's very specific. And so as you go through these, you go through and bold those keywords and do not use NLP or ChatGPT to do this. Do it manually, because there's nuance in there that you might not be able to pick up from ChatGPT. Also, ChatGPT does a terrible job of counting instances. So what the idea here is that you are trying to count how frequent this topic appears across the board, right? So download as many of these as you can. And then if certain topics come up, some of them will appear multiple times in each, even in its own job listing. Don't count it twice because it appears twice or three times. Just once across these, because we're looking for breadth, not depth here, is how important is this topic across many organizations. So you tally them off, and then you'll get a listing of what, or stack ranking of what's the most important topics or categories that's discussed in these, or that's written in these job listings. Now you have kind of a view at your level. So find the job listings that are at your level or your target listings. And now you can kind of see what they're talking about. So that's another great way of doing it. Up leveling. I'm going to move my noggin again. Gosh, my head's so big. I'm covering all the content. Remembering that design is a holistic practice. When have we forgotten this? You cannot go in there just being a science guy. You can't go in there as just a craft person. You can't do all that without understanding the business side either. So you need a little bit of it all. So here's one kind of way of looking at that. And also you can maybe even use this to classify your competencies that you wrote out. Does it fit into one of these three? Gathered some data on this too. So another way of kind of looking at this whole search application process that you've been having. You'll probably notice on LinkedIn, a lot of people are counting how many jobs that they applied to and how many callbacks they got, and then how many. So that what they're referring to is this funnel, is a conversion funnel for applications. And doing some searching, I found a pretty wide array of what is expected, the industry standard. So from application to interview, it was like 2 to 12%, 2 to 8%, I think. So I used to, here are the citations if you want to check these out. So 8.4 was kind of where I landed based on the averages of those two sources. And then for from interview to offer, it was about 36%. Why is this weird? Because it's changed since the last decade. This first part, or top of funnel, has really dropped from the previous decade and really rose up on the second. What all this means is that there have been so many more applications. They're being way more critical in the top of funnel. And then once they've got their candidates through here, then they have a higher chance because they've only selected a handful from there. And they're being way more conscious earlier on of bringing in the right candidates and not wasting people's time, which is a good thing. So use this to compare to your own, and that. I hope this is useful to you. If you want to have a conversation one-on-one with me, reach out to me on Goodest Design Club and get more content. Make sure you subscribe and like the. Thank you.